Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. Hello. This is episode number 321 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth DiAlto. Today we have Amir Khalighi with us. A few months back, I had posted on Facebook and Instagram that I was looking for more men to invite on the show, and Amir was one of the first recommendations I received. He is the founder of Embodied Masculine. And in my initial call with Amir, I really appreciated his devotion to the Divine Mother and the way he spoke with reverence and respect for both the earth and women, as well as the connection between the two and all of us. Now, before we dive in, I want to make a note that this conversation did lean in the heteronormative direction, since most of Amir's work and experiences, as well as my own, are in that realm. And we also bumped into some crunchiness around gendered terms and certain teachings, which I never mind because, like I say in the show intro, not every guest's views reflect my own, nor should they all the time. So his big truth was around how disconnected we are from nature, source, ourselves, and our higher selves. A few other things he shared were about the masculine body and how the masculine body has a longer distance to travel to get to the pleasure side of themselves. What happens when a man is not allowed to express what's in him to be expressed, and why he's not into pacifism as an approach to oppression. Amir also walked me through some archetypal stuff from a few bodies of work he incorporates deeply into his practices with men. And my hope for this interview is that this is something that people of any gender can listen to and share with the men in their lives to gain some perspective, maybe even some understanding and connection to bridge some gaps, create some growth and healing among us, or at least start some conversations that need to be happening or would be useful or helpful to have. So let me know how this lands for you. As always, you can find me on Instagram at Elizabeth DiAlto. You can email us at hello@wildsoulmovement.com. Share it up. This is episode number 321. So if you want to check the show notes, links to anything we mentioned, go to untameyourself.com/321. And for those of you who have been patiently waiting to hear how you can get on the wait list for Power 2020, I am going to be letting you know that next week. So keep an eye out, keep an ear out. If you're not already on the mailing list, head over to wildsoulmovement.com, enter your name and email where it says join the conversation at the top of the page. Or you can also make sure that you're following me on Instagram because I will post everything in my stories as well. All right, y'all, let's get into today's show. All right, Amir, how are you?
Yeah, I'm awesome. How are you, Elizabeth?
I'm really good, thank you. How's your body today?
Well, I am recovering. I've just this whole household's been under. My wife's got pneumonia.
Ooh,
I got all the kids got sick. So my body is at about 70% today,
okay.
not by choosing, just by the effects of life
Yeah,
falling on me.
I'm sure
Us.
some people listening can relate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is
Yeah.
just day in and day out of being in these meat suits.
Oh my God. Yeah. The meat suits really, you really need to pay attention to the meat suit for
Yeah,
sure. I mean, otherwise, the meat suit will get your attention.
listen, that is for real. So, the big first question that I like to ask people because this is the second
Yeah.
time we're recording this interview is what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
Wow, this is the second time around. I didn't know we were going to do this, but I thought we were going to just do like our little
I know it's
snippet.
so funny. So anyone listening for context, Amir and I had recorded an interview a couple weeks ago, and then you had messaged me like, "Oh yeah, I realized when I said this thing, I left out this part," and I was like, "Yeah, I also realized that I had written down a couple things I wanted to ask you and totally forgot to ask you," and I was like, "Do you want to do it over?" And we decided to do it over, but he thought we were just doing over like one section, and I was like, "Oh, we're doing this whole damn thing over again." So it'll be an
Yeah,
adventure.
good, good. Mulligan.
Mulligan.
Um, the biggest truth today is, I mean, okay, there's an overarching truth, right? That's the one I talked about, like that's having the most impact on my life, which is the reality of how disconnected we are from nature. Like that's becoming super like I'm becoming super aware of what that is and how that's impacting like everyone's life. The unconsciousness, the absolute. I mean, in the past, there used to be at least like a guise from, let's say, corporate America, where like they would at least hide it, the fact that they're kind of plowing the land, or they're going circumventing a law, or they would at least try to put on a face, which is not necessarily that it's better, but it's gotten blatant. So now um, it's like, yeah, we're gonna run through that. Um, we're gonna run through that land with that pipeline, and fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's blatant. So the blatant disregard just points to this incredible disconnect that we have with Mother Nature. And when I say Mother Nature, I mean connection to Source. I mean connection to our higher self. I mean connection to ourselves. So that's been uh, that's been really the overall arching truth that I've just, um, I mean, I guess on some level, most people on any kind of a spiritual path know this, but it's just gotten really, really blatant to me. So, and what I can do is, okay, so what I can do, what I've been called to do is like, okay, man, it's a big project. Like, this is not like, you're not going to get to see the rewards of your work necessarily,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
this is the work, so one man at a time, or whatever your thing is, you're going to do what you're set out to do on this earth at this time, right? And your circle of influence is going to be rewarded accordingly. And so that's the that's what's in my heart, you know.
Thank you. Yeah, and this is interesting because sometimes I can get a little existential angsty and feel like there's literally no amount of anything I could do that's going to help turn this ship around. But it's just not true. Like even the smallest drop creates a ripple effect. And I really do think about that one person at a time. And we don't know who that person is touching and who that person is touching. And so it's fascinating the timing. I'm actually just realizing that we rescheduled this after this weekend. I had a conversation with a man this weekend. He was asking me about my work. When I was telling him, he's like, "Oh, do you do this with men?" And I said, "No, I focus on women. There are men who do this kind of work, embodiment." But I was thinking about it, and I'm going to experiment with something to actually do like a wild soul movement class with men because and so here's why I'm telling you this because I'm curious if this is something that people already do. I realize sometimes I have an idea that occurs to me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this probably exists elsewhere, but
Yeah.
actually to guide men through some kind of like more feminine movement to see if they can access their feminine, and just even being able to touch that, if that might actually be able to give them just a little bit of compassion where they might not have had it before. This is my
Yeah.
hypothesis that I'm interested in experimenting with, and I'm curious for your opinion on that.
Well, I can share you my experience on that. And
Amazing.
the experience is that, yes, this is happening in men's groups. It happens
Cool.
in my men's groups.
Awesome.
And what I do, with men, it's so like, it's so interesting working with men. So I, when we do a practice, where I drop them into their feminine.
Hmm.
So the practice, what I do is like the lights get dim. I hand out blindfolds. Like they literally like they're in blindfolds because men get super self conscious. Like
Yeah.
they want to who's watching, what's happening.
They want to do
They're
it
all,
right, right?
they want to do it right. They're up in their head. So to drop them into their bodies and to tell them to move only when they sense pleasure. Men have a longer distance to travel. The masculine
Mm,
body has a longer distance to travel to connect to the pleasure side of themselves. So what we do is we dim the lights, we hand out these blindfolds, get some good music, and then I have to constantly remind them that, like, this is not a dance.
mm-hmm.
Like, we're not dancing. You're not at a club. So let's just let go of like, the so try to get in touch with what feels good for you to move into your body, which if you're a fly on the wall, it's really interesting to see because there's a spectrum. Like, some men have feminine physical bodies and
Mm.
emotional bodies, and that's something that
Yeah, we were going to revisit.
we're going to revisit. But they have, men have a hard time kind of knowing what feels good in their own bodies and how to let that live and express itself,
Yeah.
right? And the more we can play with that, I think, the more that they can get in touch with that part of themselves, the easier like it's going to be for them to give a shit when they're walking past a homeless person, or you know um if they notice a trash that's on the ground, or whatever the
Yeah.
thing is that requires your calling, right?
Mm-hmm.
For you to speak to it. I'm not saying men are dense, but the masculine is just a little bit more, has a longer way to travel
Yeah. I
uh,
like the way you said that.
before he can drop into that space.
And, obviously we're making some generalizations here, y'all. And I'm assuming, but I'm going to ask so I don't assume. The men you work with are mostly cisgendered heterosexual dudes or no?
I don't really ask. I mean, no, we get it. I mean, we get men that are homosexual, heterosexual. I don't really, and this is a great topic because, masculinity and gender identity is like, I'm interested in like embodiment. If you associate um, more with the masculine, I can work with you. Now, if you're a woman and you associate with the masculine more, I may not be the best
Right. Yeah.
selection for you.
Hmm.
My flavor may not, because I work with dark energy. I do a lot of warrior stuff.
Hmm.
I like to, like turn down the lights, and I like to bring it out of them, and
Hmm.
let that let them embody a lot of different energies, including the feminine. But I play with dark energy. I play with like, warrior energy. I like to really get them to own all aspects of it.
Yeah. Okay.
But
No, I was just curious because,
yeah,
obviously we're saying men and we're generalizing, but, there's always a bell curve. There is a majority likely of the people who that would resonate for. And we just want to acknowledge that it might not be for everyone. So I like this, what you said, the masculine body has a longer distance to travel and get to the pleasure of themselves. And this was something when you and I had first connected, not for the interview, but before that, um, you were talking about something, and I love the way you put it and explained that actually having a connection to nature also connects men to their hearts. And I think you kind of just touched on that, but can you say more about like I'd be really curious. What do you see that does for men specifically? How does that connection start to impact their lives?
Well, intrinsic value in coming into the realization that not only is nature nurturing you, but in reality, she is a part of you, that you are a part of her, that when you hurt her, you hurt yourself.
Mhm.
And um, there is nothing left to do but to advocate for her.
Mhm.
So the more men can get in touch with nature, or her with a capital H, the more they are dropping into their hearts, the more they are, um, uh, the less they're associated with what society is feeding men, right?
Yes. Yes.
Because
Yes.
society is not building an army of men dedicated to serving her, nature. It has no moral compass. Its sole purpose is to sell and to uh, re, uh, reformat us into uh, living batteries, right?
Mhm.
It just wants to use us. That's all it wants to do. It wants
Right.
to use us for its own purpose, profit, and power.
Mhm.
So anytime, that's why retreats, that's why it's so important. You do retreats. What do you retreat to? You retreat to nature.
Mhm.
Always retreating to her, right? The spiritual teachers of the past, things got busy, things got chaotic. What would they do? They would retreat into nature, because that's where the insights come in. That's where the information comes in. That's where you get in touch with your heart. That's where the inspiration happens. So the more I can get them in touch with themselves, the more um, they are in touch with her, whether they know it or not.
I love this. And I am hoping that people listening to this, not only, for themselves, it will give our listeners some insight into men if they are not a man or identify that way, or it could be a bridge to conversation if they invite any man in their life to take a listen, right? Because I think something that it's certainly I didn't always realize, but I realize it now, are the same systems that oppress marginalized people. Although being man is certainly a dominant culture, right? Um, Dominant part of our culture, the system isn't built for you to be your fullest expression of yourself either, right? Like this thing that you're saying that it's like forcing people into like power and profit. And for men who are supposed to be the providers, I'm putting that in air quotes for anyone who's listening, if that's not someone's nature, right? Like you're talking about, like someone might have a more masculine essence, someone might have a more feminine essence, someone might be more inclined towards like the arts or creativity. They're not going to be like trying to work in some corporate environment. They're not going to be competing. They're not going to fit into that like traditional honored masculine role. Like we've talked about this on the show. One of the things that even sparked Wild Soul Movement coming into existence was my own shame of feeling like I wasn't feminine enough. Like there are men out there feeling like they're not masculine enough, but these
Yeah,
definitions are like oppressive and very limited definitions that our culture hails as like the right way or the best way. So like men suffer at the hands of that shit too.
yeah. Well, men suffer. Yeah, I mean, men suffer mostly because of unexpressed feelings and energies that are like deemed to be like, oh, like there's no safe place, to express, let's say,
Mhm.
necessarily like, warrior energy. Like there's just, there are certain archetypal energies within the masculine that are there whether we like it or not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with men and they, you know, so what happens is when you don't, when a man is not allowed the full expression of what is in him to be expressed,
Mm-hmm.
then that archetype will go into its shadows.
Yeah.
Now you got a bigger problem, right? So a warrior energy, for example, of a masculine archetype, mature masculine archetype, as uh, explained beautifully by Gillette and Moore in their book King, Warrior, Magician, Lover.
Mm-hmm.
The warrior energy is the energy of the protector, the one that cuts through the bullshit, that gets up and does what needs to be done in spite of the um, chatter in his mind. When tethered to purpose, he serves a higher calling. So, I mean, the energy of this uh, masculine charge is really an important part of like our society. I mean, we live in a society, where we do need protectors of the boundary, and we are in nature. Nature in and of itself has its own, it's not all flowers, right? I mean, sometimes you have to defend, sometimes you have to confront. So the energy itself needs to be expressed in a healthy, mature way. When society says no to that, it says we don't want that. What happens is men start going into these shadow pockets, and now that energy becomes masochistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now that that warrior energy will become sadistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the same with the other archetypes of the masculine. So if society is not going to have the ability to have a container for acceptance of this energy, then we will find forums to create space for men to come to explore and express. Because once you explore and express, then you're in balance in your life, right? And
Yeah.
when the archetypes of the masculine are in full bloom is when they give rise to the king archetype. And the king archetype, all he is a regenerative power that is tuned in to something greater than himself that guides his life. He is a blessing upon his people. He brings rejuvenation. You've seen it. When the king is like in fairy tales, when the king is in his kind of full form, the people are happy. They're prosperous. The plants are growing. Like the you know the unit is radiant and full. When he is not, when he goes in his, so what are the king's shadows? When the king goes in his shadows, he becomes a tyrant,
Mm-hmm.
right? So then you have men who want to be the king, but don't have that blessing or that connection upon them. So what do? They force. They
Mm-hmm.
become tyrants. They either become tyrants or they become the weakling or impotent in their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of work I do. I create a space for men to be able to come and have expression, so they come out of their shadows, so we have a better chance to connect to her. And once you're in service to her, you can't hurt others.
Yeah.
You can't hurt her. You can protect. Like if somebody comes through my gate, you better know that I'm going to deal with it. Like it doesn't make me a pacifist by any
Right.
means, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So this is interesting. You and I were having a little conversation before we hit record that we don't need to give the full context for it. One of the things we were just exploring is, you come from a mystical perspective, you come from a place of like deep reverence and connection to not just the feminine but to Mother Earth and nature. Um the creative as like a creative animating force of the universe. And, for people who resonate with that, like the things you're saying might make a little more sense. For people who don't necessarily have that connection, there might be a little head scratching. So I just want to acknowledge that for anyone listening. But what What I love about that is, I'll tell you a phrase that I see like memes and T-shirts. There's a pet peeve of mine is the future is female because no, right? Like that's just a pendulum swing from where we've been. Like the future
Good.
needs to be integrated, the future needs to be whatever. But there is this like horrendous lacking of reverence for the feminine principle in our culture that we do need to account for. Like we do need to, right? So that doesn't need like to get to like the even balance place. To me, it feels like we do need a little bit of a swing to like gather up and collect and attune and acclimate ourselves to what it's like to have this reverence for this principle and integrate it into society and culture, right? And then we can come back into a little more like equitable place.
Yeah.
But like and there's no right or wrong way, right? So this is I'm throwing this out here as like an inquiry and like my own hypothesis that like, you know, when we talk about equity, it's not like evenness. We have to kind of look at where's the lack been? Where's the like we just haven't had, what are we starved for? It's almost like not really different than if you get your blood tested and you come back deficient of vitamins and it's like you got to take some supplements. We're not saying screw these other supplements, but that's not what you need right now. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does make sense. It does make sense. And I mean, um, we got to deal with the fact that oppression needs to be fought against. Oppression of a system or women or uh, like any kind of oppression, you cannot be a pacifist against, right?
Mhm.
So through awareness, through organization, through politics, whatever we need to do, we have to realize that there's going to be some form of engagement against that kind of society or behavior. And it doesn't have to come from anybody. I mean, certainly the warrior energy of the masculine, if serving a higher purpose, should be fighting against
Mhm.
it like that, right? So while that is happening, women don't need to necessarily, the feminine doesn't need to become the masculine. The
Mhm.
feminine can be uh, revered and that doesn't, just because I'm revering the feminine, it's not like I don't need to revere the feminine equally as I do the masculine in order to say that I'm not, you know, being sexist or whatnot, right?
Right, right, right.
But we need to, it's like a multi-pronged approach in bringing balance back to the earth.
Yeah.
And the way I envision it, the way I see it with, honestly, women have incredible depth and insight, and the masculine has incredible qualities that are his, and to find a way for both to shine independently and um, create a society where I don't need to bottle up the feminine energy because I'm afraid of it, because that's what really the masculine has two options: fear or awe. When it comes to looking at the feminine, the masculine looks at the feminine, a creature that can create life, uh, and he has two responses. One is, oh my fucking God, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Life is actually like recreating itself through her and birthing like this miracle of love and life. And you can go into awe, or you can go into like, what the fuck? Like, just somebody put chains on that. Because
Right,
if
right.
that power comes into its own, what does that mean? So sadly to say, throughout millennia, men have chosen fear of the feminine energy and have tried to burn her at the stake, put political restrictions on her
Mhm.
body. Whatever they whenever they move into fear, they're going to try to control it, and you can't control nature. You can't.
Right.
That's why you will. That's why at the end game, that is not sustainable, because the grass will grow in spite of the rock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The grass will grow past the rock.
Yeah.
Am I
Okay.
am I way too like all spiritual and esoteric?
No, you're
Because I
fine.
can
I love the deep and the esoteric, right? And, we say in the intro of the podcast, not every conversation is meant to be for every person. There is something though that I need to address, and just like, you,
please.
you can use whatever language and vernacular you want to use. For me personally, if I'm ever using the term masculine or feminine, I am
Yeah.
only specifically referring to energetics, right? If I'm
Yes.
saying man or woman, those are genders, right? So
Correct.
I'm hearing you use them a little interchangeably. And just for anyone who might be confused, I'm just saying for me, when I use those, I I don't love that for the energetics, it's gendered terms, but those just make sense and we know what it means. But if I say man or woman, I'm talking about like a gender, right? And I
Yeah.
know people are a bit more fluid, and that's not their thing. And so, but I'm hearing you use them a little interchangeably, and I'm tracking. But for anyone
Yeah.
listening, I just wanted to set that straight.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm pointing to something, right?
Yeah.
Right. I'm pointing to something, and in order to see what I'm pointing at, if we get, and of course, I respect, like, I'm totally like all in for everybody, right?
Hmm.
And and I cannot wait. I have a friend of mine, just to kind of go sidebar for 1 second. I'm so interested uh, in getting a perspective. I have a friend who I'm waiting to post a blog for me in regards to um, gender and mass and energetic masculinity, and she has a lot of experience and insight into that.
Cool.
So my point my point is overarching. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if I'm cross referencing, no disrespect to anybody.
Yeah, I'm hearing that and I sense that about you, right? And this is one of the things that I am always kind of talking about, which is we do have to give someone the benefit of the doubt long enough to see where they're coming from, and just make sure like we have an understanding before we're like, screw this person, they don't care. Like, to
Right.
me, you obviously care, and like it just wasn't explicit. So that was important to me to clear that up. Okay. There's something I want to close the loop on. Can you share about the other two archetypes? You talked about king and warrior. There's also magician and lover. And I love hearing about like the shadow and the light
Yeah.
side of things. So,
So sure. So the lover archetype is the energy that is connected to all beings, right? Takes pleasure in the knowing of the interconnectedness of all things, drinks and loves that, right? So it is it is the energy that brings the humanity to the other archetypes. The other archetypes, in and of themselves, are void of necessarily the heart connection. And the lover energy complements them to bring humanity into their expression. And the lover, when in his shadow, will one polar opposite is that he becomes addicted.
hmm hmm
He becomes an addict in his shadow. Um, and on the other spectrum, um, he becomes impotent. He becomes impotent. So in his full bloom, his expression is love, connectivity, um, senses of the pleasure. He is the poet. He is the lover. He is the dancer. He is the artist. The magician archetype is kind of like the advisor.
hmm
He is the one that oversees the landscape of where to go, what to do, what not to do. He is educated. He is knowledgeable. Um, and all of these archetypes, the magician, the lover, and the warrior, when in service to the king, come into their bloom. And service to the king really, you know, is to a higher calling. So to one's what you would believe is your purpose, why, you're doing what you're doing. And the magician, if he goes in his shadow, he becomes the manipulator.
Mm-hmm.
He will manipulate situations. He will use his ability to decipher and create situations to serve himself rather than serve a purpose. And on his other polar shadow, he becomes what's known as the innocent one. So even one step worse, he'll do what he wants and he'll be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, he will completely remove himself, make you think you're the crazy one.
Mm-hmm. Basically, narcissism.
You're like, basically, a few men I've dated.
Yeah. So what's the difference between the impotence of the king and the impotence of the lover?
So the king is really more of a weakling.
Mm-hmm.
Less of impotence. When the king is in his shadow, his negative polar shadow, he's a weakling. He doesn't have authority. He loses his voice. He doesn't express himself. He stays quiet. He doesn't lead. He starts disappearing in his own life.
Got it.
And then for the lover, he just is, he cuts himself off from feeling.
Got it. Right. And so those are two different ways. I like that distinction. Also, when we were chatting a while ago, many years ago, I was really into the work of Alison Armstrong. And I still think there's actually some really great valid stuff. Are you familiar with her work at all?
No, say more.
She does a lot of work helping women understand men and vice versa. But one of the things that she talks about in one of her main books, which is called The Queen's Code, is how women emasculate men, often without knowing, right?
Yeah.
But what's interesting is I found, especially because I've now had this like year and a half of dating where I'd never really dated much before, men are sensitive. Some people would call it fragile in a lot of ways, very defensive. They can't be with a boundary. They can't receive feedback. Again, obviously not all men, but when I brought that up, you were talking about how in a way that's kind of like men emasculate themselves in a way. Do you remember that? Does that make sense?
Say a little bit more so I can catch on here.
So I'm looking at the things that actually, here's a better way to ask the question. Things that, and we're speaking very heteronormatively here, things that women actually do that are emasculating, and things that men perceive and feel emasculated by.
Yeah.
So, and an example would just be like, I set a boundary with someone and he has a total friggin' meltdown and feels like I'm personally attacking him. And I'm like, I'm literally just asking for what I need in this situation, which, in one recent example is to like, just back up on the affection a little bit. Right. And he takes that as a personal affront and literally can't even fathom that I just have a need to not have him all over me.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if that's emasculating per se. I mean, that sounds like that's just like a healthy boundary. Like you're like, that's where you're at.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. That's not, having a boundary is not emasculating, but someone taking it as if it is, like a personal affront.
Right. Well, maybe this may be a good time to talk about the 4 different body types, right? So, in the work that I do, that has been kind of handed down from, I take work from everywhere, but this specifically comes from David Data and John Weiland. So there's a talk about 4 different types of bodies that we have. So we have like our physical body, we have our emotional body, we have a sexual body, and we have a spiritual or a cosmic body, right? And on a spectrum, the men, fall somewhere on the spectrum. So, for example, I have a physical body, which basically means like I can wear the same shirt literally for like 5 days, and then like I'm okay with it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't need to, like, the physical body wants adornment, right? So if you're feminine, you may be more interested in like, adorning your physical body. For me, I don't. Like, I can wear the same thing.
You're saying that's masculine physical body?
Masculine physical bodies
Got it.
wear the same thing. I'm cool. I like, just put on a hat, whatever.
Yeah.
So like, but for me, my emotional body is more feminine. So what that means is that if you come at me the wrong way, or the wrong way for me,
Wrong way
unquote,
for you, right?
for me, right?
Yes.
In air quotes, the effects of it may be a lot more turbulent in my emotional body, right? And a lot of men don't have the capacity to have their own containers for their emotional bodies. So what happens is they take it as an assault, and then they're like, Wah! They're like, that comes out in that way, right?
Yeah. They
then
feel
you
like
have
they need to defend themselves.
They feel like they need to just express everything that's happening in them, right? And it just, it comes out however it comes out, and it could be like a fight, it could be like a whole like drawn out thing. It's like, whatever. Then you got your sexual body, and then you have your
what's the masculine emotional body? So you said that was the feminine. You have a feminine emotional body. What's the masculine look like?
So the masculine looks like you say something to me, and it takes a lot longer for it to hit my heart. It takes longer to reach me. I'm more dense. Like, it takes longer for it to travel in land.
Yeah. Dense not meaning stupid. Dense just meaning there's like more for it to filter through to actually get to the spot where you could feel it. Yeah.
Think of it this way. In the cosmic or spiritual realm, the masculine energy associates itself with nothingness, with no beingness, with the empty space that is the majority of this entire universe. It associates itself, it's more relaxed in the state of that versus the feminine, which is the expression or the light and everything else that comes through, right? So every art, every expression, nature itself is feminine, expressed through light, right? So the masculine, when I say dense, I just mean like expansive.
Yeah. Yep. Got it. Okay. So you were going to say this. So the masculine sexual body, feminine sexual body.
Then you got your sexual bodies, right? So, who's leading in that space, right? Receiving, who's leading. If you like to receive, you're, out of the gate, you're more like,
Surrender.
Receive.
Yep.
Surrender, receive. You're associated more with the feminine. If you're more like claim, like energetically forward, right? There's masculine, and you could be on the spectrum. We are all on the spectrum. There's a spectrum. There's not one thing that's right or wrong or whatever, right? So, but there is a natural resting, and there's a resting space. There's a resting space. So you sometimes, you rest it, on the spectrum more towards the feminine or masculine.
You know what? I was having an interesting conversation. This is a context I had never thought about before because I don't have the experience. I was having a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's bisexual, and she was saying that when she is with men, she has more, to put it in your context, she was saying she was using the word dominant, but in this context, it would be more of like the masculine sexual body. And then when she's with women, she feels more surrendered and receptive, which is and we had a very interesting conversation about it. She's exploring her sexual identity right now. So it's not something I would invite her to come on the show to talk about, but it's a fascinating, because I don't have that experience and I love hearing about things that I just literally don't know about. But I thought that was super interesting how that difference, and I'm sure for people who are fluid in their sexuality, that's probably not the case for everyone, but it's like a possibility I'd never even considered before. It's depending
Yeah,
on
I mean,
who they're interacting with.
I am I'm super curious about, you know, men or women who identify in different genders and how, energetics work within man. And,
Mhm.
that's why I'm so excited, to have, my friend Vanessa, write her blog post um, on that topic,
Yeah,
you know.
I will be keeping an eye out for that when it comes out. Okay, and then so the last one is the cosmic or the spiritual.
Right. The cosmic or the spiritual is just what I just touched on a little bit ago. The masculine feels more relaxed when they drop into a state of being that they associate more with that empty space,
Mhm.
more with that cosmic kind of no beingness, that stillness,
Yeah.
right? And the feminine energy is everything that um, is created out of that emptiness.
Mhm.
So all the movement, all the life, all the
Yeah.
light.
What I loved about finding out about this was probably like 2 years ago, is that there's so many people who struggle with like stillness meditation practices,
Yeah.
and there's so many people who are like, this is superior, you need to learn how to sit still. If you're having resistance, work through the resistance. And honestly, it's just like an inappropriate piece of advice for certain people. So if you have the more feminine spiritual body, like the stillness might not be for you. That
I
might
mean,
not be how you're accessing or cultivating or strengthening your connection to God or the divine, whatever you believe in. It might be having a movement
beautiful,
practice.
beautifully said. My wife, goes to a movement class, and they move for like 3 hours. Like they just
Hmm.
move,
Hmm.
and that's where she feels most in her body, most
Yeah.
connected.
Yeah.
So not everyone's got, like, the man on the mountain, or in the Himalayas is not. That's why actually they would go. By the way, they would retreat, be alone, because they want to create that, like, it's really like what death is.
Hmm.
In a way, it's like death, like, that stillness in being. But that's not everybody's flavor. That's not, for sure not the feminines. Yeah.
And I mean, I find there are seasons, right? So there are times when I do crave stillness, but like my
Hmm.
predominant spiritual body for sure is more feminine. But there are times where I'm like, I need to be still. So none of these things everything exists
Oh
on
my
a
God.
spectrum.
I think this, I think really getting on board first and foremost that we embody the entire spectrum within us,
Hmm.
and that we don't need to be anywhere at any time. But
Totally.
we can certainly observe what our body does in its
Hmm.
natural state, and we can have a conversation around that. But I love diving into my feminine.
Hmm.
There's something, I love poetry. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to
I
check
did.
what's up. What do you think of that?
All right. Well,
So,
so to give people context, tell them what you're talking about.
some years back, I was going through a really hard time, and I just fell into the space of rendering. I love Sufi poetry, and I was having a really, really just painful, gut wrenching, grieving time in my life. And I, instead of to keep my heart open, I just, started rendering poetry and doing it for myself. And then I just started creating this library. Eventually, I had this library of Sufi poetry, and then I got into Neruda, and then I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to put this stuff out there. So I happened to also be into web development, so creating websites is really easy for me. So I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to create a website, put this stuff on there, and put it out in the world. And I created belovedpoetry.com. And so
It's just you reading poems.
it's me reading poems of Hafez, Rumi, Neruda, Kabir. I mean, but yeah, that's the lover. That's like, feminine expression, so,
So
um,
soothing. It's over like almost like meditation, kind of like music and sounds that some people might associate with. I was like, get out of here.
yeah, yeah, it really served me. And I feel really good about it because, it's like, it's out there and it's, for people to drink up
Yeah.
and so I feel good about that.
It reminded me of a dear friend of mine loves, do you know who David White is? Are you familiar with his
I do.
poetry?
I love David White.
And
Yeah. I
he
have one
reads
of
his
those on
stuff.
there.
Yeah, 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 yeah. A friend of mine sent me that one. She's like, I just want to listen to David White read poetry until the end of time. I wish I
Oh
didn't have
my
to pay
God.
my bills. Um,
Oh my God. Totally. Yeah. One of my
uh,
favorite poems of all time is by David White called Winter Apple.
so okay, getting towards wrapping up here. I am really curious. One of the big disconnects that I just hear consistently from women in my that I encounter in my work and that in my life and my friends, and I've also seen this is, some people are experiencing a huge disparity between like women are really out there doing their healing and growth and spiritual work, and they're either already connected with men who aren't, or they're connecting with men who aren't. And so I'm imagining that men probably show up to your work sometimes of their own volition, of course, but probably sometimes also because there is a significant woman in their life being like, you got to do some friggin' work, bro, or I'm walking.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I am curious, when men are showing up in that place, like, is there a difference between when someone shows up of their own volition and when someone shows up because basically there's like an ultimatum, like, if you don't do this, I got to go?
Well, the ones that show up of their own volition have a higher chance of sticking around. And when you do it for yourself, I mean, you're just probably going to be a little bit more all in rather than um, if you're doing it for someone else. I
So,
mean, it's admirable, but at the end of the day, those who go deep are the ones that get the message that it's time for their work to begin.
and so what are the impetuses for those people when it's not like a directive coming from somebody else or a request or an ultimatum?
Um, well, look, I mean, people come to the door for any reason. It's like those who stay end up doing it because they see the benefit.
Right, right, right.
Um, you may come in because men may come in because they're having a hard time like connecting or communicating with their ladies, and they do the work for a little bit, they move some shit through, and then they're like able to hold space and not react and get triggered. So they see benefits right away, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, it's that they have to like stick around for themselves. And the ones that like kind of get a little bit of reprieve and then they disappear, but the ones that stay, they get it. They get the importance of like what it means to be connected, what it means to keep a practice where they keep their vessel kind of clean, and that's the thing, man. Like they stuff comes in and it doesn't come out right, like as easily. It just kind of comes in and just gets stuck in places, and then you're like, why can't I connect to this man? Like, why can't I feel him?
Yeah, yeah. My friend Randy Buckley, she's been an acquaintance and peer for many years now. She posted something. I don't know if she posted it today, but that's when I saw it. That says, sometimes folks disengage, don't reply, or just sort of disappear, not because they're toxic, but because they're embarrassed or ashamed. Sometimes the very folks that are written off as not caring don't know how to gracefully navigate themselves back into your lives. And
Yeah.
with this conversation in mind, I was thinking, I know certainly this is a lot of women experience this kind of thing from men and then want to
Mm,
go, he's toxic, he doesn't care. And it's like, he literally just doesn't have the tools or skills.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's true. I mean, that's why, I'm not the only, game in town working with men. There's like, there's a lot, our world is pretty big. And the
Yeah.
more I do this work, the more I become aware of like, quality men that are, creating, an environment where other men can reconnect, And there's a lot of good men out there. I mean, there's good men that are working on themselves that want to do good, and you know, and I'm kind of hopeful. I'm hopeful for our society, and just to circle back, it's like, that we are engaged on a little bit of a battle. The Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita opens on the battlefield,
Mm-hmm.
and we are fooling ourselves if we think that this is not a serious piece of business. The Mother Earth, she keeps giving and she keeps giving, but something's got to change.
Mm-hmm.
The abuse that she withstands is really heartbreaking. And we need a paradigm shift. We need political shifts. We need to get back into balance, and it starts with working on ourselves, and
Mm-hmm.
serving where we're called to serve. And I have 4 girls, and and I want to build a better future, for them.
Yeah. And so for anyone listening, there's just another thing that feels important to say. We were obviously we were speaking a lot in this conversation about doing men's work. And it's not that women don't need to do their work, right? It's not that women aren't harmful. It's not that women aren't abusive. They certainly are. And I'm sure you deal with that a lot in your work. You see the impacts and the effects of that on the men who show up in your work. But this was just a conversation about like, what's going on with men? What are they doing? What's going on there, right? So we're not saying other people don't need to work on their stuff too. These are just the times when I feel like I have to do all this preempting all the time to be like, yes, y'all,
Yeah,
we know that other things are happening, and this is the thing that we're talking about today.
yeah. I understand that. Yeah.
So, all right, if people want to find you, if people want to work with you, the website is embodiedmasculine.com, right?
Right.
And your
Yeah.
Instagram is Amir Khalighi. We're going to put it in the show notes, but will you spell it for people while we're here?
Yeah. It's just at Khalighi. Yeah.
At Khalighi. Okay, cool. So, spell that.
It's just the ampersand and then my last name, which is Khalighi.
That's what I was asking you to spell because it's not like
Oh,
intuitively phonetic for people.
I know. Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate
Cool. Thank you so much. Everyone listening, share the episode, get in touch with Amir. Let us know what you thought. Obviously, I always post it on Instagram. You're welcome to DM me if you don't feel like sharing your thoughts publicly. It was so enjoyable. Thanks, Amir.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
All those revolutions and even with Harvey Milk is because they hit critical mass. They hit this tipping point where you had collective consciousness now. So that is the shift of collective consciousness. Now this old paradigm will break because there is a new paradigm where enough people are thinking a thing to make it solid and real. Then you have what I was saying before, your destiny. No human being, and this is going to be a hard pill to swallow, and some people will reject it, but nobody can manifest anything outside of their destiny.